6 people have been killed, more than 20 injured in Russian air attacks in southern Ukraine. Now, this comes a day after both Ukraine and Russia launched record waves of drone attacks against each other. 5 people died in the south-central city of Mykolaiv in the early hours after the attacks struck a residential area, damaging apartments and causing fires. Another person was killed in Zaporizhia in the southeast. Ukraine issued an air raid warning for the entire country and cut power supplies after the Air Force warned that Russian bombers had taken off from their bases. Ukrainian officials say the attack wave is now over. Let's put this into context with military expert Marina Miron. Welcome, Marina. Good to see you. What do you make of these latest developments? Yesterday's huge drone attacks, then today's massive air alert across Ukraine.
Hello, Anya. Well, we have to put it into context because if we recall, in October 22, when General Surovikin took command of the Russian forces in Ukraine, these air attacks have commenced in somewhat regular intervals. And now that we're nearing winter, of course, the Russians will be very interested in destroying the critical infrastructure, Ukrainian critical infrastructure, as well as potential military targets. Besides, if we look at the locations of where the attacks went, for instance, Zaporizhia, that's where the Russians will probably be developing their military activities after having taken Vuhledar. Therefore, it's a logical continuation of their military strategy, so to say. Of course, while some reports claim that these attacks follow a reported call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, which should have taken place last week. According to these reports, the Ukrainian side is saying basically that this is Russia's response to Donald Trump. In other words, Donald Trump has not calmed down Putin, quite the opposite. Russia is showing that it is going to continue the course and accelerate its advancements in the Donbass.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back to the American election and Donald Trump's victory in just a moment. But I did just want to ask you, the Reuters news agency quoting a top Ukrainian commander saying that Russia had amassed tens of thousands of soldiers in the Kursk region. So are you expecting a major Russian push to retake the territory that Ukrainians currently hold?
It is very possible. According to reports, there are some 50,000 soldiers, including the North Korean contingent. And if we look at the Kursk region and look at the past 2-3 weeks, we have seen that the Russians have launched a series of offensives on the Ukrainian flanks, specifically at the north. And therefore, I think that we are to expect yet another wave of offensive operations by the Russian forces in order to get the Ukrainian forces out. But whether it will actually materialize remains to be seen. It's quite a difficult situation, and it's not clear right now how that will play out. That being said, the Ukrainian forces are also in difficulty in Kursk because of their logistics. So the Russians might very well go for the supply lines in order to cut the Ukrainian forces off and surround them.
Marina, you mentioned the election of Donald Trump earlier. He will, of course, be the next US president starting in January. But just come back to what you were saying earlier. Is this already influencing Kyiv's and Moscow's actions at this point?
Well, at least in the media space, what we're seeing in Ukraine, of course, the Ukrainian side is not very keen on Donald Trump's victory because it comes with a lot of unknowns and a possible favorable position by Donald Trump towards Russia. Nothing is certain yet, but what Kyiv understands is the possibilities that the military aid might be cut off and that Kyiv will be forced into some sort of a negotiated settlements with the Russians in which it will have to cede territories and probably abandon all hope of NATO membership. And therefore now it is up to Kyiv to demonstrate its military capability. And I think that's what we were seeing was a drone attack on Russia, where Kyiv launched the largest drone attack since the start of the war.
Military expert Marina Miron. Marina, thanks so much for your insights, as always.
For the very latest, let's go straight to Kyiv, where DW's Nimisha Jaiswal is standing by. Nimisha, there was a huge air alert all across Ukraine this morning. What was behind that?
Well, Terry, nightly air raid alerts are sadly not uncommon across Ukraine. But this morning, the real concern was sparked shortly before 7 a.m. when we heard reports of MiG-31Ks taking off from Russian airfields, like you just mentioned. Now, these are capable of carrying hypersonic Kinjal missiles, which is a cause of serious concerns. And there were air raid alerts as a consequence all across Ukraine. Now, no strikes were carried out by these specific bombers, but this is also seen as a way to suss out air defenses, to sense for the Russians what exactly Ukrainian air defenses would react with. And these are seen as test runs almost before a major strike. The concerns, of course, remain high. There were also power blackouts, and there were concerns around energy infrastructure being hit, something we've seen Russia do over the course of the year to freeze out Ukraine in the third winter of this war. There was also debris that hit power infrastructure and caused blackouts in 12 regions across the country.
And there were deadly strikes in parts of Ukraine overnight. What can you tell us about those?
Exactly. We know that at least 5 people have been killed in the Mykolaiv region where personal property was hit. And this was a consequence of drone debris hitting those buildings. We also know that at least 1 person has been killed in Zaporizhia after 3 guided missile strikes hit Zaporizhia. And we're now hearing reports that at least 1 person has been killed in Kherson as well. So a deadly night here in Ukraine. But this also follows several such strikes all of last week across the country as well.
So we've got those deadly attacks. We've got massive reciprocal drone attacks now between Russia and Ukraine. Activity is said to be increasing on the front lines as well. Is there a sense in Ukraine, Nimisha, that this war is heating up?
Well, you're right, Harry. The previous night, we saw Ukraine being hit by 145 drones from Russia. But while this was the highest number we've seen, I have to point out that there has been an incremental increase of drone strikes over the last 3 months consecutively. President Zelensky pointed out that the drone strikes were 10 times as much as they were last fall. And this is also seen as a campaign to once again suss out air defenses to mount a massive missile attack later on. And this is also why Ukraine keeps calling for more air defenses and for the capacity to hit drone production and strikes within Russia as well. And of course, this morning we also had the Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky mention that there's troop buildup in the Kursk region in Russia as well, which Ukraine had carried out campaigns in. So there are definitely high tensions. Analysts here believe that both what we're seeing with the MiGs as well as the drone campaign we're seeing, as I mentioned, is maybe preceding a much bigger much bigger missile strike, over here in Nimisha,
Nimisha, thank you very much. That was our correspondent, Nimisha Jaiswal, in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv.